The challenge in subject-verb agreement questions is to determine the right subject and verb pair, and then to figure out whether the subject is singular or whether it is plural, and then choose the correct verb for it. So I have some questions here where we have options for the verb and we have to choose the right answer. Pause the video at this stage and try attempting these questions on your own. Once you have an answer, unpause the video and come back and check if you got it right. Question 1. The discovery of new medicines was or were vital to the company's growth. In this kind of questions, you must always ask what the subject is. What is vital to the company's growth? It's the discovery of new medicines. Not medicines themselves, but the discovery is vital to the company's growth. Since discovery is singular, my verb will also be singular, was. In general, if I have X of Y, the discovery of new medicines, then my subject will be X, the discovery, right? This is something to remember. Number 2, the list of items include 3 notebooks and an eraser. Again, the subject here is list. It's the list that includes 3 notebooks and an eraser. And since the list is singular, my answer will be includes, right? The list of items, the subject is list. Being singular, you'll choose includes. The houses on the road to Mysore, just off the highway, is or are gorgeous. What is being described as gorgeous? The houses. The houses on the road to Mysore, just off the highway. And since houses is plural, I would choose are. The houses are gorgeous. When the auditors left, the executive who had been interviewed was or were glad. Which person or which persons are being described as glad? The executive. He was glad when the auditors left. And since the executive is singular, my answer would be was glad. Limping, the horse once considered one of the favorites, was or were taken away. Who or what was taken away? The horse. He was one of the favorites, but it was the horse that was taken away. And since the horse is singular, my verb would be was. Okay, let's try some more. Question 6. In the waning days of the emperor's life, the conquest of new lands on the borders of the empire was or were considered vital. So again, I have a lot of words in this sentence, and I have to kind of pin down what was considered vital. What was it that was considered vital? And the one word that was considered vital is the conquest. Right? The conquest was considered vital. There is new lands in the sentence. There is borders of the empire in the sentence. We are also talking about the last few days of the emperor's life. But ultimately, my verb will go with the noun that it is meant to represent, what it was that was considered vital, the conquest. And since this is singular, my answer would be was. A coalition of smaller nations led by Singapore and New Zealand is or are promoting a tariff-cutting pact to expand trade in medical products. Now, I know that there is a tariff-cutting pact that's being discussed to expand trade in medical products. Who is promoting this pact? It's a coalition of nations, a coalition. This collective noun, a coalition of smaller nations. And collective nouns would take the singular verb. Since coalition is a singular collective noun, it would take the singular verb. And so the right answer is. Okay. Number 8. Opponents of social distancing rules are using Facebook to organize protests at the homes of health officials in campaigns that health authorities say amount or amounts to harassment. This is an interesting question because there is a lot that is happening in the sentence. So we need to kind of figure out how to choose the correct verb. So let's try and make some verb combinations with nouns. Opponents of social distancing rules are using Facebook, right? So I already know that opponents is going with are using Facebook to organize protests at the homes of health officials in campaigns that health authorities say amount or amounts to harassment. What is it that amounts to harassment? Okay, another thing, I should make sure that I connect this say is the subject, is the verb for health authorities. Okay, so I have found another correct subject verb pair. Health authorities say that these campaigns amount to harassment. It is the campaigns that amount to harassment. This is the correct, well, let me choose another color. This is the correct noun for the verb. And since campaigns is plural, my right answer will be amount. So if we break it down again, it says opponents of social distancing rules are using Facebook to organize protests at the homes of health officials, right? In campaigns, so these protests are campaigns that health authorities say amount to harassment. The campaigns amount to harassment. So if you can break down the sentence and find the correct noun for the verb, what amounts to harassment? The campaigns. Then you can select the correct verb. Okay, let's do the last one. Last one seems to have two mistakes or two options that we need to correct. The tidal forces to which an object falling into a black hole is or are subjected is or are sufficient to tear the object apart. So first of all, what is sufficient to tear the object apart? The tidal forces. The tidal forces, which is plural, are sufficient to tear the object apart. So I already know that this one between is and are is going to be are. The tidal forces are sufficient to tear the object apart. Okay, the tidal forces to which an object falling into a black hole is or are subjected. Which object is subjected to the tidal forces? The object falling into the black hole. So if I change my color, the object falling into the black hole is subjected to the tidal forces. So for this verb, this one or this one, the correct noun is object, which is singular. And so this answer would be is, right? So you see here that for tidal forces was the noun for the verb are sufficient. And so we said are. And object falling into the black hole. Object is the noun for the verb is subjected. So we chose is. So if you are careful of finding the correct noun for a verb in a sentence, and normally these questions will have longish sentences to kind of make you work in selecting the correct noun for a verb, then you can answer these questions with high accuracy each time. Question 1. Deep below the mountains of central Vietnam lies what could be described as another world. And here we have 4 options for this part, where as has been given with a colon, with a dash, without any punctuation, and with a comma. So Let's first look at the options that we can eliminate. Option A can be eliminated because the colon should come at the end of a complete sentence. Right? That is the most important thing to remember about the colon. It should come at the end of a complete sentence. For example, I could use a colon if I had said, deep below the mountains of central Vietnam lies what could be described as a paradise, and then colon, the name of the place, right? So you should only use a colon if the part before the colon is a complete sentence, right? So that makes A out. Okay, a single dash can be used as a colon in an informal sense, but since the colon itself would not work here, a single dash would also not work here. So B is out. Actually, we don't need a punctuation here, right? So the right answer is C. And why don't we need a punctuation? Why is it not D? Remember that a single comma indicates a break, right? For example, I could have a dependent clause here. And a comma and an independent clause. For example, when I met him, comma, I gave him a book, right? This comma indicates a break between a dependent clause. When I met him, I gave him a book, right? Another example of a single comma break is when a modifier and an independent clause need to be separated. So let's look at that. So let's have a modifier and an independent clause. Recognizing the need for collaboration, the scientist formed a team of researchers. So who recognized the need for collaboration? The scientist, right? So this part, recognizing the need for collaboration, that part is the modifier. And the scientist formed a team of researchers. That's the independent clause. So to indicate the break between the two, I put a comma. I would not put a comma here because there is no break here. I'm saying that there lies what could be described as another world. That's just a continuous sentence. So here the answer is option C, no punctuation needed. Okay, let's go to question 2. I'm going to change to a darker color. Okay, so this actually doesn't look like a punctuation question, but it is. At roughly 5 miles long, 300 feet wide, and 600 feet tall, Sondung is large enough to hold an entire city block of 40-story buildings. So Sondung is a cave in Vietnam, and this sentence is describing the dimensions of the cave. Now, let's say I had to choose an option between B, C, and D. This marvel is roughly 5 miles long, and so on. The cave is roughly 5 miles long, and so on. Or it is roughly 5 miles long. In each of these cases, if I had said this marvel is, or this cave is, or it is, in each of these cases, this part would be an independent clause, and this part would be another independent clause, right? because I would say this marble is 5 miles long, 300 feet wide, and 600 feet tall. That's one. Sondung is large enough to hold an entire city block. That's another. If I have two independent clauses, I cannot join them with a single comma. Two independent clauses can have a semicolon or a full stop between them, right? But not a comma. And since a comma is given here, I need to make the part before the comma a modifier. It can't be an independent clause, which is why the right answer is option A, no change. Because if I say at roughly 5 miles long, 400 feet wide, and 600 feet tall, Sondung is large enough to hold an entire city block of 40-story buildings, then that entire part before the comma is a modifier describing Sondung. And so a comma after tall makes sense, right? Okay, let's go to question 3. Still talking about Sondung. Portions of Sondung contain what many envision when they think of caves, which dark chambers ornamented with gigantic calcite formations and populated by colorless creatures. Right, now the first thing I notice is that this doesn't read correct, right? The way the sentence is given doesn't read right. So there is something off about this. So obviously A cannot be the right answer. What the sentence is doing is that it is saying portions of Sondung contain what many envision when they think of caves, right? So this part of the sentence is creating an expectation for the reader of what it is that many envision when they think of caves. And when you have the sentence creating an expectation, which is then answered by the next part of the sentence, the best punctuation is the colon. Because if I say portions of Sondung contain what many envision when they think of caves, colon, dark chambers ornamented with gigantic calcite formations and populated by colorless creatures, right? We also notice that this part before the colon, portions of Sondung contain what many envision when they think of caves. This is a complete sentence. And so we can use a colon after this because we need to put a colon after the complete sentence. Okay, what's the problem with option C? In option C, I'm putting a semicolon here. I'm putting a semicolon, and this goes. Now, that is a problem because a semicolon should come between two independent clauses, and this part is not an independent clause. This part is only describing what is inside the cave. It doesn't have a proper sentence. It doesn't have a subject and a predicate. And so option A is out, option C is out. What about option D? If I don't put any punctuation, then I would simply be saying portions of Sondung contain what many envision when they think of caves. Dark chambers, that's just a run-on sentence. It doesn't make any sense because I need to indicate a break between what people envision when they think of caves and what that thing is. So the right answer is option B. B is the right answer. Okay. Next question. Other parts of the cave are dramatically different. Verdant ferns, palm trees, bamboo, and stinging nettles flourish here as well, right? Now, the first thing I notice is that I'm supposed to look at this part, and the part before the comma is an independent clause, and the part after the comma is another independent clause. And so I can't use a comma here, so that means no change is not an option, right? I'll discuss that if I want to use a comma, what additional thing do I need to add if I'm trying to join two independent sentences? But just a comma without anything else is not correct. Okay, what about option B? In option B, I'm adding a connector here, for instance. So I'm saying other parts of the cave are dramatically different. For instance, verdant ferns, palm trees, bamboo, and stinging nettles flourish here as well. That makes sense. The for instance part is fine. But again, this comma here plays spoilsport. The comma here cannot be used because the part before it is independent and the part after it is also independent. So for the same reason as option A, option B is also wrong. Option C. In option C, I'm replacing the comma with a semicolon. And that should work because we know that if we have two independent clauses, we can place a semicolon or a full stop between them. So option C would be my right answer. So I'll go with option C. What about D? In D, I'm using a conjunction and. So I'm saying other parts of the fanboys, other parts of the cave are dramatically different. And verdant ferns, palm trees, bamboo, and stinging nettles flourish here as well. The thing about this and is that it is trying to join an independent clause with another independent clause. And when I use a conjunction like this, it should have a comma before it. And so I come to the rule about joining two independent clauses with a comma. Two independent clauses can be joined with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. And you can remember the coordinating conjunctions that can be used with the acronym FANBOYS, where F stands for, A stands for and, N stands for not, B stands for but, O stands for are, Y for yet, and S for so. So here I remember to use the rule that I can join two independent clauses with a semicolon or with a comma plus a fanboys. Since in this option D, I am using a fanboys, but I'm not using a comma, option D is not correct. And so the right answer for this is option C. I just want to discuss this last concept a little bit more. Let's say I have a sentence, my hamster loves to play, comma, I gave it a hula hoop. My hamster loves to play, I gave it a hula hoop. Now here I have two independent sentences, so I can't put a simple comma between them. I will have to add a coordinating conjunction like so. My hamster loves to play, comma, so I gave it a hula hoop. Of course, I can also say my hamster loves to play, semicolon, I gave it a hula hoop. Yes, this is grammatically fine. But I think the first sentence, the one above, is better because it creates a very distinct, a very specific cause-effect relationship. My hamster loves to play, so I gave it a hula hoop. So remember that in punctuation, you have to first look for grammatical accuracy. Here's the above sentence and the one below, they are both grammatically accurate. But you should also try and look at what you are trying to say. And the sentence above says it better. When it comes to pronoun questions, there are a couple of things that you need to remember. The first thing has to do with pronoun agreement, which is to say that the pronoun should agree with the noun it is supposed to represent. This agreement can be in terms of number. That is to say, if the noun is singular, then the pronoun that replaces the noun should also be singular. Disagreement can be in terms of gender, which means that if the noun is male, then the pronoun should also be male. If it's female, it should be female. If the noun is inanimate, the pronoun should also be inanimate. So things like that. So let's try and find the errors in these questions, and let's try and make the pronoun agree with the noun. When a person calls, take down their information. The problem here is that this pronoun there is supposed to refer to a person, and a person is singular. Let me change the color for this. A brighter color would work. Yeah, a person is singular, while there is a plural pronoun. And that would not make sense. So here I would have to change this there and say his or her. When a person calls, take down his or her information. Question 2, everyone here will need their own pencil. Again, everyone is an indefinite pronoun, words like everyone, someone, no one, and they are singular. So when I say everyone will need their own pencil, this plural there will not work, and I would have to say his or her own pencil. Number 3, some people believe that the benefits of a healthy diet outweigh that of regular exercise. Now here, I'm comparing the benefits of a healthy diet with the benefits of regular exercise. So this pronoun has to replace benefits, which is plural. And so I can't use the singular that. I'll have to replace this with those, the plural pronoun. Some people believe that the benefits of a healthy diet outweigh those of regular exercise. Number 4, if one is hungry, he may eat. The thing about one is that one continues to take one in the rest of the sentence. We cannot change the pronoun to he or she. So if one is hungry, one may eat. So one normally is used to represent to oneself, right? So it's like saying, if I'm hungry, I'll eat. But if you're using one, you stick with one in the rest of the sentence. Number 5, Ria left all her class notes at school because she decided that she could do her homework without it. Now this pronoun needs to agree with class notes. Because what did Ria think she could do without? She thought she could do without the class notes, and so she left them at school. But class notes is plural, and so I cannot use the singular it. I will have to use them. She realized, or she felt she could do her homework without them. So that's what we mean by pronoun agreement. The pronoun should agree with the noun in terms of the gender and in terms of number. Let's look at slightly more advanced problems for pronoun agreement. While the definition of Generation X is hotly debated concerning the age ranges of its members, culturalists generally agree that they describe a group of adults that are self-focused, cynical, and skeptical. So my noun here is Generation X. The definition of Generation X is hotly debated concerning the age ranges of its members, because I'm referring to Generation X. Culturalists generally agree that they. I have now suddenly, in the middle of the sentence, shifted to the plural they, even though my subject is the singular Generation X, right? And that can't be correct. So I would need to correct this from they to it. And since I'm correcting the pronoun to it, I would also have to correct the verb to describes, because now it would need to be a singular verb. And you can see that the first half of the sentence used the correct pronoun its, but the second half did not. And so now it's fine. Culturalists generally agree that Generation X describes a group of adults that are self-focused, cynical, and skeptical. Number 7, with the release of their 5th album, Hotel California, the band explored the pursuit of the American dream when accompanied by the loss of innocence and the presence of temptations. Here, my subject is the band, which is a singular subject. And so I cannot use the plural pronoun there. That is not correct. I would have to change this to the singular pronoun its. With the release of its 5th album. Whose 5th album? The band's 5th album, the band being singular. With the release of its 5th album, Hotel California, the band explored the pursuit of the American dream. Now, if you're not sure whether to choose ITS or IT apostrophe S here, that is something we'll discuss in one of the future slides subsequently. So let's move on. Okay, the other kind of error refers to pronoun ambiguity, which means that the pronoun is correct in terms of number or gender, but it is not clear which noun it refers to. The noun is not clear. So for example, if I say, I'll position the target and when I nod my head, shoot at it. Now, most of us understand that this it refers to the target, but it could also refer to the head because there are 2 subjects or 2 nouns in the sentence, and it is not clear what the pronoun refers to. And if the person who is receiving these instructions does not clearly understand, he might end up shooting the person, the speaker in the head, resulting in a tragedy. So when you have an ambiguity like this, when it's not clear which noun the pronoun refers to, you should repeat the noun rather than use a pronoun. So you will say, I'll position the target and when I nod my head, shoot at the target. It is better to repeat the noun in case of an ambiguity. Okay, the team's poor sportsmanship made all of them look like whiners. The team's poor sportsmanship made all of them look like whiners. This is kind of hanging here because even though I know that it refers to the members of the team, the problem is that I spoke about the team's poor sportsmanship, which was a singular, while all of them is a plural. So there is some mismatch between the noun and the pronoun. So how do we correct this? We can say the team's poor sportsmanship made all of its members look like whiners. So rather than say all of them look like whiners, where them is not very clear because it's a plural pronoun referring to a singular noun team, I should convert them to its members because now it's very clear that its is the team, its members look like whiners. Okay, let's look at the third one. After interviewing several nurses, I realized that it was not the career for me. Again, I don't know whether it refers to interviewing or nursing, right? It's possible that the person was trying to be a journalist and he interviewed a group of nurses and he decided it was not the career for him. Or it's possible that he wanted to be a nurse or she wanted to be a nurse, and after interviewing nurses, they decided it was not for them. So I would have to specify whether we are saying interviewing is not the career for me or journalism, depending on the context, or do I mean nursing is not the career for me? That would have to be specified. It is ambiguous. Okay, let's go to the third kind of pronoun error, which refers to pronoun case. What do I mean by pronoun case? You would see that every pronoun represents two kinds. One is the pronoun that is used with the active voice, and the other is the pronoun used with the passive voice. For example, I and me. I met him, he met me, right? So one is the subject pronoun and the other is the object pronoun. He, him. She, her. They, them. We, us. And so on, right? So all of these pronouns have two cases. And then there is a third case, which is for possessive, right? I, my, or mine. My book, this book is mine. His and his, her and hers, their and theirs, our and ours, right? So we have these cases, and the use of these cases depends on what I'm trying to say in a sentence, right? For example, when I say he runs faster than, it is very common to say me here. He runs faster than me, but that's actually not correct. He runs faster than I, because basically I'm saying he runs faster than I do, right? So when you have a comparison here, you would use the active pronoun, the subject pronoun. Similarly, he's older than I, not me. He's older than I am. So if you complete the sentence after the pronoun, if you add the verb, it's very clear that it would have to be the active pronoun. Okay, this is a good one. The cat licked its tail. This is a very common question on SAT writing and ACT English. And the difference between this is that ITS is the possessive pronoun. So that will be my answer for this one. The cat licked its tail, the cat's tail. While IT apostrophe S is the abbreviation for it is. Like, it's a sunny day today. It is a sunny day today, right? So I know that when we think of possessives, we think of the apostrophe, right? But possessive pronouns do not use an apostrophe. Like if you look at hers, theirs, ours, its, none of these possessive pronouns use an apostrophe. So here the answer is ITS without the apostrophe. Now, this is to be kept between you and me, right? When we have a preposition like between, then we use the object or the passive pronoun after the preposition. You and me. This is to be kept between you and me, right? I'll give you another example. This gift is for him. This gift is for her, right? So for being a preposition, I'm using the passive pronoun for him, for her. Okay, let Raju and something that we have to choose enter the room. Who is the subject here and which is the object here? The subject is not written, it's you, right? When I say let Raju and whatever enter the room, I'm addressing somebody, so that you is invisible. That's the subject. And Raju and whatever is the object. And for object, I would use the passive pronoun. Let Raju and me enter the room. Right? So every verb has an actor, the one who does the action, and a receiver, the one who receives the action. If the actor has to be used, we use the active pronoun. If the receiver has to be used, we use the passive pronoun. Let Raju and me enter the room because it is you who's doing the action, who's letting us enter the room. Number 6, doctor, my child and I would like to visit you tomorrow. Why my child and I? Because now my child and I are doing the action. We are doing the action of visiting. And you are the recipient of the action. You are being visited. So here the answer would be the active pronoun. My child and I would like to visit you tomorrow. Okay, let's see some more examples. Janice and me went on a picnic together. This is clearly wrong. Janice and I went on a picnic together because this is active. They are the actors who are doing the action. The picnic was attended by Janice and me because now the sentence is in passive voice. In passive voice, I would use the passive pronoun. The picnic was attended by Janice and me. Okay, number 3 and number 4 test the difference between who and whom. And this is a very common question and one that students tend to get confused by. A very simple rule for this. Answer the question in your mind. Who are you going to marry? And see if the answer has he or him. If it is him, use whom. If it is he, use who. Who are you going to marry? I'm going to marry him. So I would have to say, whom are you going to marry? Who are you going to take to the movies? I'm going to take him to the movies. So whom are you going to take to the movies? Let me give an example of who. Who is coming to dinner? Who is coming to dinner? He is coming to dinner. He is coming to dinner. He replaces who, so this is fine. So this is the quick handy trick to remember. Answer the question in your mind. If the answer uses him, take whom. If the answer uses he, take who. Number 5, I don't understand why me and Bob always have to take out the garbage. Now here, Bob and me or Bob and I are doing an action. So we have to use the active pronoun I. The other problem is that I and Bob is not the correct order. We should write Bob and I, right? Whenever you have a noun and the personal pronoun comes in the end, where Bob and I have to take out the garbage, right? So those are the 3 kinds of pronoun errors you can see on SAT writing and ACT English: pronoun case, pronoun ambiguity, and pronoun agreement. Still here? Well, that's great because you've completed one half of this long video. If this is helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. That will be a great help. Okay, now on to the next topic. Question 1. He believes his sampling of other artists' music qualifies as fair use, a legally permissible borrowing of copyrighted material for a transformative purpose. So here we are speaking of someone who uses other artists' music for his own creation, and he feels that that sampling is fair use. It is a legally permissible borrowing of copyrighted material for a transformative purpose. So if I look at the options, the first option asks me to keep the words, the phrase as it is. The second option says legal and lawful use of. Now, if you notice, legal and lawful mean the same thing. And so this option is redundant because it repeats words that mean the same thing. And so it can't be the answer. If you look at option C, a legal acquisition through borrowing. This is self-contradictory because to acquire something is to basically come to own it, and to have it as your own, while borrowing is something that you only keep for a certain amount of time before you return it. So this option is self-contradictory. So that also is not correct. And option D says a valid means or acceptable method, in other words, to borrow. Now, this is what is called too long an option, something that is not concise. It is not concise or precise, right? When you can say the same thing with fewer words and make the sentence precise, concise, and succinct, you should not use an option that employs so many words. And so the right answer in this case is no change. The borrowing of copyrighted material is legally permissible. So something that is lawful, legally permissible, borrowing of copyrighted material. So the right answer is A. Okay, let's go to the next question. Harvard economist Erez and his colleagues have learned that reputation is a strong incentive for making choices that aid the public good in ways that benefit everyone. Now here I'm talking about some research that has been done by an economist and his colleagues, which says that reputation is a strong incentive for making choices that aid the public good in ways that benefit everyone. So reputation is how you're perceived by others, and that is a strong incentive to make choices that would help everyone, that would aid the public good. Now, public good basically means something that is shared by everyone, the common good, the good of all, right? So this part, if you look at option A, this part kind of becomes redundant because it means, public good means that you're trying to benefit everyone, right? So option A cannot be the right answer. In option B, again, in society is redundant because when you say public good, you mean social good, good of those in society. So that's redundant, that's not needed. So B is out. In option C, for all is also redundant because when you say public good, you imply it is the good of all, right? So it can't work. And so the right answer is option C. You simply have to say that reputation is a strong incentive to make choices that aid the public good, which means that benefit everyone in society, that benefit all, right? So this is what we need to do for a question that tests redundancy. Okay, let's go to the next one. On June 20, 1965, murmurs of excitement filled a Kingston, Jamaica auditorium where way more people than were expected gathered for commencement services at the University of the West Indies. So here I'm describing an event at the University of the West Indies where there were commencement services happening and a lot more people than were expected came for the services. Now, this question tests us on tone. Tone meaning how would you write something in a formal passage, right? The words that you would use to convey that this is a formal passage that can appear in a magazine or a journal, right? So way more people than expected, that doesn't sound too formal, right? Because this is not the kind of language you would use in a published text, right? This is called colloquial language. Colloquial language meaning language that you would use in day-to-day conversation, right? Like slang was colloquial, or even other kinds of normal day-to-day words that you use, right? So way more people is not formal. So I'm not happy with A. An unusually large crowd. That sounds good, right? I'm saying that there was a crowd that gathered there, and it was unusually large. It was larger than what was expected. So I like this, so I'm going to keep it for now. A whole bunch of unexpected people. Again, a whole bunch is way too informal, right? That is not how you're supposed to write in a text, in a proper text. And a whole bunch of unexpected people doesn't really convey the sense that the number of people was unexpected. This makes it sound that the people themselves were somehow unusual, right? So this also distorts the meaning that we are trying to say. And option D, an enormous crowd of an unparalleled nature. This is what is known as an exaggerated option, right? It is just too long and it tends to convey the idea with more words than is necessary. So it is not concise. It is not concise. And we should always look for an option that conveys the information concisely, that doesn't take too many words. So I'm not going to go with D also. So B is the best answer. An unusually large crowd gathered for commencement services. Okay, next question. Pilots who fly planes for crop dusting and other purposes experience disquiet regarding the presence of drones in the airspace above farms. Okay, so here we are talking about farmland and some procedures being undertaken, crop dusting, etc. And there is the discussion of drones doing this, and the fact that pilots who do fly planes for these purposes, they don't think drones should be doing it, right? So there is this kind of argument that the pilots are forwarding that drones should not be doing this purpose. So now, the thing is, my first instinct when I read experience disquiet regarding, I feel that it's kind of exaggerated, right? Because this context, the context of crop dusting using drones over farms, does not merit the use of such strong words as disquiet, right? I would feel disquiet about a tragedy, right? So this is something to consider. This is something that you should probably worry about, but disquiet sounds extreme. So I'm not going to choose A. Now, stew over is colloquial. It is informal, right? When I say that I'm stewing over something, I am worrying about it, but I'm using very informal language. So I would not use it on SAT or ACT grammar because I'm supposed to use formal language. So I'll not do this. Get all worked up about is again informal. I use this to talk about somebody who is excitable, who reacts impulsively. So this is again something that I could use with friends, but not on a test. So this is informal. Worry about. Worry about is formal. It is concise. It conveys the sense that pilots worry about the presence of drones. So this is the best answer, option B. Okay, next one. After cooking the horse a mash of oats and corn, the caretaker would watch him eat, taking notes of any changes in appetite noticeable to him while the horse was eating. Right? Now, if you notice, this context describes a caretaker, a horse caretaker, who has cooked the horse a meal, and the caretaker watches the horse eat so that he, that is the caretaker, could take any notes if the appetite of the horse has changed. So if I think about it, I don't really need this, right? I don't need this because I'm already saying that he is taking notes of any changes in appetite and it's happening while the horse is eating. That's very clear. That's understood. So this is redundant, right? This is redundant. It's not needed. The sentence already conveys what the underlying portion is trying to say. So A can't be the right answer. Okay, so option B, taking notes of any changes in appetite that become apparent while watching him eat. So again, that is obvious because if I'm taking notes of any changes in appetite, it means that those appetite changes would be apparent to me. I would notice them while the horse is eating. So this is redundant as well. So option C, taking notes of any changes in appetite that were noticeable to him. So again, that's not needed because if I'm going to take notes, those changes have to be noticeable to me, right? So this is also redundant. And so I should just delete the underlying portion and end the sentence with a period, right? So you see, in this kind of question, I was not really looking at grammar because grammatically options A, B, and C were fine. But I was looking at what the sentence was trying to say and if there were words that were not needed. So that is the challenge with redundancy questions. to spot words that are not needed, even if grammatically the sentence reads okay, right? Okay, let's go to question 6. Gemstones with a crystal structure, garnets, are formed many miles beneath the surface of the earth. They are really good in geologic dating. So here I'm talking about a kind of gemstone called the garnet. And I'm saying that they are formed many miles beneath the surface of the earth. And so they are really good in geologic dating. Now, again, if I say really good, it sounds kind of informal, right? I'm trying to say that gemstones, that is garnets, are used for geologic dating. So really good doesn't really capture that sense of what they are used for, right? So I don't like option A. Okay, they work so well when it comes to geologic dating. So one, this is not concise, right? It's just using too many words, right? I'm sure there is a way to say the same thing in fewer words, right? So that's the first problem. And then work so well. Is that the best way I can say what they are used for? Not really. So I don't like B. They are particularly useful for. Now that's a good option. I know that they are found beneath the surface of the earth, so they are particularly useful for geologic dating. This is what they are used for. So I'm going to keep this for now. And they do a pretty good job with. Now, this, just when you read this, you see that this is very informal, right? A pretty good job is not something you would use in a formal text. So I don't like D. And so my right answer is option C. Garnets are particularly useful for geologic dating. Okay, let's go to the next question. Scientists can analyze garnets to determine the temperature and pressure of the earth when the gemstones formed. Such analysis are possible because garnets also contain monazite, a rare mineral that is easily dated. So here I'm talking about garnets again, and I'm saying that they can be used to study the temperature and pressure of the earth when these gemstones formed. And one reason that this analysis is possible is because garnets contain monazite, which is a mineral, a rare mineral that is easily dated. So you can easily find the age of this mineral, and you can then determine the age of the gemstone. So that looks good, right? That doesn't look exaggerated. That doesn't look informal. It doesn't have any redundancy. So I'm going to keep option A. Now, option B, monazite, a rare, easily dated mineral that makes these analyses feasible. Now, I'm already saying such analysis are possible in the sentence, right? So I don't have to repeat the fact that this mineral makes these analyses feasible. So this is, the underlying part is redundant. I don't need to say that because it's already said in the sentence. So option B is out. Monazite, a rare mineral that is easily dated without difficulty. Easily dated indicates that it is without difficulty. So I'm kind of repeating that. So this is again redundant. I don't have to say that again. When I'm saying easily dated, I don't have to say without difficulty. So this is out. And option D, monazite, an easily dated rare mineral found in garnets. Now, I know that garnets contain monazite. I'm already saying that. So I don't have to repeat the fact that this mineral is found in garnets. If I do that, I'm again employing redundancy because my sentence already says that garnets contain monazite. And so my best answer is option A, a rare mineral that is easily dated. So it is important to understand how to spot redundancy. When you have options where you're not being tested for grammar, but where you're basically looking at the same phrase, but it is being written in different forms, then choose the option that conveys the information correctly, does not distort the meaning, is concise and is formal, and does not have any repetitive information. If you do that, you'll get these questions correct. Question 1. She estimates that identifying problems faster with timely crop data and using less weed killer will save her tens of thousands of dollars in future years. So we're talking about a person who is trying to figure out solutions to farm problems, right? She wants to get crop data in a timely manner, and she also wants to use less weed killer. And she estimates that doing all of this will save her a lot of money in future years. So here I'm talking about something that will happen in future, right? And so the way it's written already, will save, which indicates the future tense, looks like a good answer. So I'll keep A for now. Option B, had saved, that is the past perfect tense. And that doesn't make sense when we're talking about the future, right? Past perfect tense, as the name indicates, is used in the context of the past. Are saving is present continuous, which again doesn't make sense because the hope for saving money is in the future. And have saved is present perfect, right? So none of these tenses make sense because here the idea is of saving money in the future. So the right answer is option A. Okay, question 2. For the program, participants permitted the installation of a device in their homes that limited the use of an air conditioning unit. Researchers then place a sign-up sheet in a public area within the apartment complex to get residents to enroll. So here I'm talking about some program that was monitoring air conditioning usage by the residents of an apartment complex. And for the program, the participants, they permitted the installation of a device that would monitor air conditioning use. And once this was done, researchers place, or whatever verb we need to use, the correct tense, they put a sign-up sheet in a public area. Now, I know that this entire thing happened in the past because this tells me, right? This is in the past tense. So I know that I'm describing an event that has already occurred. So I can't say place because this is the simple present tense, right? The simple present tense cannot be employed here because we are describing an event in the past. And so the best answer for this would be option D. Researchers then placed a sign-up sheet in a public area to get participants or residents to enroll. So many times in tenses questions, your answer will come from the context, right? Here we know that the program was conducted in the past. The previous line tells us the timeline of the program, and so it is simple to choose the right answer for the underlined portion. Now, will place is future, so that doesn't work, and have placed is present perfect. So that doesn't make sense either because I'm talking about the past here, right? The past tense option is which I have to choose. So D is the best answer. Okay, question 3. Scientists decided to use a variation of carbon dioxide in which the ordinary carbon atoms, 12C, would be replaced with carbon 14. Plants would metabolize the 14 CO2 as though they are regular CO2. Okay, so here we are talking about the case of scientists not using the regular 12C carbon dioxide, but replacing it with the 14C carbon dioxide. And then it says that plants would metabolize the 14 CO2, the one with carbon 14, as though that carbon dioxide were the regular carbon dioxide, the C12. So here we are talking about a hypothetical scenario, as though refers to hypothetical scenario. And with the hypothetical scenario, we always use the verb were, whether it is singular or plural. Whether the subject is singular or plural, we always use the verb were. For example, he behaves as if he were the boss, right? He behaves as if he were the boss. Why do I say as if he were? Because he's actually not, right? He's actually not the boss, but he behaves as if he were. So it's a hypothetical. So here, even though I'm saying he, which is a singular noun, I use were, right? So this is something that you need to remember, that for hypotheticals, you always use the verb were, whether the noun is singular or plural. So here then, plants would metabolize the carbon-14 carbon dioxide as though it, because here it refers to the carbon dioxide, so I have to use a singular pronoun. So I can't use they, right? Because I'm referring to carbon dioxide, so it has to be it. As though it were regular CO2. It were, right? Because as I said, it is not regular CO2, but plants would think it were, right? So this is hypothetical. And so the right answer is option C. Okay, question 4. From the size of the buttons on the coat to the angle of the pleats on the trousers, nearly every feature of a traditional bespoke suit is chosen by the customer. Still, Andrew Roop, a pioneer of bespoke tailoring, encourages young apprentices to develop their own style within those constraints. So here I'm talking about bespoke tailoring, which is tailoring that is done to fit a customer's specific requirements. And the first line is telling me that every aspect of a bespoke suit is chosen by the customer, right? So it's not something that you can just go and purchase off the shelf, because the customer would tell you what buttons to use, what kind of angle the pleats on the trousers should have. So every part is chosen by the customer. And yet, even within those constraints, right, Andrew Ramroop, who's a pioneer of this craft, he encourages people who have joined this profession, young people, young apprentices, to develop their own style within these constraints. So again, the context tells me that this is being spoken, or this is being said in the present. Every feature of a traditional bespoke suit is chosen, right? So that is the present tense. I know that from the context. So the context tells me that I should continue with the present tense, right? So Andrew Ramroop encourages young apprentices, right? So this sounds correct, because Andrew Ramroop is a person, a singular noun. So encourages sounds good. So I'll keep it for now. Okay, option B is the present continuous tense, right? And I can't use that in this context, because when do I use the present continuous tense? When I'm talking about an action happening right now. For example, he's attending a prayer service at the church, which means that he's attending it right now. But if I say he attends the prayer service at church every weekend, then I'm talking about a general action, a general occurrence that happens regularly, but may not be happening as I speak. Right? So it could be a Tuesday, and I could say he attends the prayer service at the church every weekend, which means that every Sunday he attends the prayer service. So when you're talking about conveying an idea that happens in the present in the general sense, but may not be happening as we speak, then you use the simple present tense, right? And so we need to say he encourages young apprentices, because he may not be encouraging somebody right now, but in general, he encourages young apprentices to work within those limitations. So B is not correct. Okay, will encourage is the future. So that doesn't make sense, because I know that I have to use the present. My context establishes that. And have encouraged. So firstly, this is present perfect, right? And also there is a subject-verb mismatch, right? Andrew Ramroop is singular, while have encouraged is plural, right? Even if it was has encouraged, I would not choose that, because has encouraged would not fit the context again, because I'm talking about something that happens in a general sense, right? I'm not necessarily talking about something that happened in an earlier time, because that is what has encouraged would indicate. Here, the context is that this is something he does on a regular basis. So, both from the point of subject verb agreement and the point of tense, option D is incorrect. And so, the best answer is option A. Okay, that brings us to the other kind of question that you will see on tenses, where, as we saw in the previous question, option D was violating both tenses and subject verb agreement. And that is very often seen on SAT and ACT tenses questions. You will have options that may violate subject verb agreement, and that's one way that you would be eliminating those options. So, digital technology has expanded opportunities for creative expression in music. The spread of software that can be used to cut parts from different songs and paste them together have spurred new music genres such as remix. So I have options here. I see that I have spurred, has spurred. So I need to decide. First, I need to obviously look at the tense, but I also need to decide, once I have the tense, whether has or have is better, which means that should I go with the singular has, or should I go for the plural have, right? Now, let's first understand the context. I know that I'm using the present perfect here, right? This is the present perfect. So I know from the context that present perfect tense is what I should look for in my answer choices also. Digital technology has expanded. It has done this. Now, that means that I would not choose C and D, because C and D are present continuous, right? So I would not like to choose them because the context has established the present perfect. Also, I can eliminate C and D based on subject verb agreement. How? What is the noun for this verb? Have, spurred, has spurred, whichever. What is the noun? It is spread, right? When you have a long sentence, as we discussed in the subject verb agreement drill, always try to figure out that one word that acts as the subject for the verb. What has spurred new music genres? It is the spread of software, new software, the spread of software, which means that my verb has to be singular. It cannot be plural. So between A and B, B is the right answer because it has the singular has. So option A is definitely not right. We also saw that C and D were violating the tense, but you can see that they also violate the subject verb agreement rule because both of them use the plural are and were. So here the right answer was option B. It is correct from the perspective of tense and is correct from the perspective of subject verb agreement. So B is the right answer. Okay, next question. Uses for remote sensing, interpreting information captured by satellites that comes from Earth or outer space, has become more plentiful as technology has progressed. So you will always have clues to the tense being used in the sentence from what is given, right? So here I know that I'm using the present perfect. Technology has progressed, right? So again, I should look for the present perfect in the underlined part. Now, again, you can see that I have has become and I also have become. So again, it's not just a tense question, it's also a subject verb agreement question. So between these two, the correct noun, the correct subject for what has become more plentiful is uses, right? Uses have become more plentiful. There are more uses for remote sensing now as technology has progressed. So I would need to choose the plural here because uses, as I know, is plural. So that means has become is not correct. And I like have become. Now, if you look at B, first you can see that B is singular verb. So that doesn't make sense, right? Because you need a plural verb, as we have established that the noun for this verb is plural. So that is one reason it is wrong. Okay, what if it was become? What if it was the plural verb? Can I say that? Can I say uses for remote sensing become more plentiful as technology has progressed? No, that doesn't sound right because I'm talking about technology progressing. It has progressed. So uses have become more plentiful. So I should try and keep the same tense, from in my sentence, unless there is a very specific need to change it because the meaning demands it or something like that. Otherwise, my context would establish the tense I need to choose. So you see, B is wrong, both from the subject verb perspective and the tense perspective. And C, we have already established, is a good answer. In D, I'm saying will have become. That is future perfect, right? And that again doesn't make sense. This is a tense mismatch, right? So D is also out. So the very clear right answer is option C. So you see, when it comes to tenses, a couple of things to keep in mind is look carefully at the context. Let the context guide you on what tense to choose. Is the context in the past, the present, or the future? Look also for the subject and the verb and whether they agree, because very often tenses questions will also test subject verb agreement. Question 1. When exposed to speech that lacks its typical lower tones, the human brain automatically reconstructs the missing frequencies. This capacity helps people hear human voices more clearly than hearing less important sounds. So, in any question on the writing section, you should be very sure of the context and the meaning that the sentence is trying to convey. So here we are saying that when exposed to speech that is atypical, that does not have lower tones, the human brain compensates by reconstructing the missing frequencies. And it helps because this capacity lets people hear human voices more clearly than hearing less important sounds. So the cardinal rule of comparisons is that you compare like things with like things, right? Like you compare apples with apples. Okay. So I'm saying that this capacity here helps people hear human voices more clearly than. So I'm comparing human voices and I need to compare something which is similar to human voices. And that is going to be less important sounds, right? I don't have to repeat the word hearing because the word hearing is already implied in this verb here, right? I'm saying this helps people hear more human voices more clearly than less important sounds. So when you're comparing two things, ask yourself, what do I need in the underlying portion? What am I comparing? I'm comparing a human voice with a less important sound. So any option that has hearing can be eliminated because we don't have to repeat the word hearing. Now, this capacity helps people hear human voices more clearly than those of less important sounds. If I say those of less important sounds, that's like saying voices of less important sounds. Because those here will act as the pronoun for voices. And that doesn't make sense because I'm comparing human voice with the sound, not the voice of a sound, because a sound doesn't have a voice, it's just a sound. So D distorts the meaning, and so the right answer is option B. Okay, let's go to the next question. In 2013, solar installers' wages averaged $23.63 per hour, comparable to those of skilled electricians and plumbers. Now, again, what are you comparing here? You're comparing wages. You're comparing the wages of solar installers with the wages of skilled electricians and plumbers. So when you say wages of skilled electricians and plumbers, you can use the pronoun those because that acts as a replacement for the noun wages. So actually, the way it's written is good. So I'm going to keep it for now. Now, if I look at option B, in option B, I'm saying comparable to a skilled electrician or plumber. And that's not correct because I have to compare wages. I can't compare the solar installer's wages with a skilled electrician or plumber. So B, and for the same reason, D are wrong because they don't compare wages with wages. Now, option C, comparable to wages earned by a skilled electrician and plumbers. So this has some sort of a mismatch, right? The first thing I notice is it's not parallel because if I'm saying wages earned by, then I should use the plural here and the plural here. So plumbers is already in plural, but a skilled electrician is not in plural because I'm talking about a group wages, right? The wages of a professional group. So I'm comparing the wages of solar installers with the wages of skilled electricians and plumbers. So because of this mismatch, this is not the best answer. And so the best, the concise, the correct answer is option A. Okay, question 3. Job sharing initiatives may involve some extra cost for companies since the salaries and cost of benefits for two job sharing employees are usually higher than being for a single employee. So the first thing I notice is that this being is really off here, right? Being is not used like this. It is not something that you should accept easily, right? It's not a word that is a favorite of SAT and ACT grammar. So just reading this, I'm not very sure of this option. So I'll cancel A. Now, I need to understand what is it that I'm comparing. I'm comparing the salaries and cost of benefits for two employees with that or those for a single employee. And between that and those, I would naturally have to choose those because I have a plural here, salaries and cost of benefits, which is a plural, right? So I will not take any option that has that. Right? I like option C because option C says those for a single employee. Salaries and cost of benefits for two employees are higher than those for a single employee. Okay, then if I delete the underlying portion, it creates a comparison mismatch because then it would be saying salaries and cost of benefits for two employees are higher than a single employee. And I cannot compare salaries and cost of benefits with employee. I have to compare salaries and cost of benefits for one with salaries and cost of benefits for the other. So the pronoun those conveys that correctly. And so the right answer is option C. Okay, let's go to question 4. Studies of test scores show that watching television has a markedly positive effect on children whose parents speak English as a second language as compared with those who are native English speakers. Now, this is an interesting question because I have a comparison, but it's sort of a complicated comparison because I'm comparing children. I'm talking about test scores, and I'm comparing children whose parents speak English as a second language with children whose parents are native speakers, right? Because that's the valid comparison. If I'm comparing children with parents having a certain quality, this quality being that they speak English as a second language, then I have to compare this with children who have parents with a certain other quality, which in this case is that those parents are native English speakers. So the first thing I notice is that I'm not comfortable with option A because In option A, I'm comparing children with children, right? I'm saying children who are native English speakers, right? Because I mean, that's the best understanding of the pronoun those, even though those is a little ambiguous, because if I'm trying to use those for parents, that is a wrong comparison. And if I'm trying to use those for children, that is also a wrong comparison, because it is not the children who are native English speakers, it is the parents who are native English speakers. So option A, the way it's written is not very clear. So I'll cancel it out. Okay, option B does not have a pronoun ambiguity, but the comparison is still wrong. I'm not comparing children whose parents speak English as a second language with children who are native English speakers. My comparison has to be with parents, right? So B is out. Now, if I just put C, then that doesn't make any sense as a comparison, because who is it am I comparing? If I say children whose parents speak English as a second language as compared with native English speakers, then I'm just like broadening the scope of the comparison to all native speakers, and that doesn't make sense, right? It's a very specific situation of comparing children with parents of a certain quality with children having parents of a certain other quality. So C is not correct. Now D actually makes the best sense because it is not ambiguous and it makes the correct comparison. And this ultimately says that if you watch television, then test scores results show that watching television has a positive effect of children on children whose parents speak English as a second language, as compared with children whose parents are native English speakers. So I'm making the correct comparison here between children, at the same time involving parents with certain qualities. So my right answer is option D. Okay. Question 5. Compulsory volunteering in school does not necessarily create lifelong volunteers. Students who were required to volunteer rushed to complete their service hours in early high school. They then did significantly less regular volunteer work in the 12th grade than the service hours of those not required to volunteer. So let's again always first look at what the sentence is trying to say. So here I'm talking about compulsory volunteering. That is when students are made to undertake volunteering tasks in school. And the passage is telling me that compulsory volunteering is not the best idea to inculcate the habit of volunteering in students. Because if you look at the experience of students who were made to volunteer, they kind of rushed through it in early high school and did not do any of it or very little of it in the 12th grade, compared to students who were not required to volunteer. So volunteering as an activity should not be enforced on students. Now, here the comparison is interesting because here I'm saying they then did significantly less regular volunteering work. So I'm talking about the action of a group, the action of the group that were required to volunteer. They did significantly less regular work. So the comparison is about the action, the less volunteer work. Now, the first issue is I have to compare students with students. So I cannot compare it with service hours. So option A and option C are clearly incorrect, right? Because they don't compare students with students, right? Now, in option B, I'm saying, so they is the group that was forced to volunteer. That group did significantly less regular volunteer work in the 12th grade than did students who were. And this than did students who were makes sense because this also is an action which is kind of analogous to the action that my sentence had. And so it creates a comparison, or rather it avoids a comparison mismatch by including a comparison between two like things. So I like option B. Now look at option D. In option D, I'm saying they then did significantly less regular volunteer work in the 12th grade compared with students not required to volunteer. Now, this may seem like a good option, and in fact, a lot of students tend to choose D as the right answer for this. But if you think about it, you are effectively not comparing students with students only. You're comparing the action of a student group with the action of another student group, right? So when you're saying that the first group did significantly less regular work, then it is the action of this group that I'm talking about. And I need to compare it with the action of the second group, which option B does. Option D compares an action with a noun, because in option D, I have students, which is the noun here, and this does not compare the action that I was talking about. So the trick in these questions is to look at what is being compared. Am I comparing two nouns? Am I saying that students in grade 11 are uh, are taller in general than students in grade 12? Then I'm comparing students with students, right? But if I have an action that I'm comparing, which is to say students enforced or students forced to volunteer did less volunteer work in grade 12 than did students who were not asked to volunteer. So here the comparison is between actions, and so the better answer, or rather the best answer, is option B. Question 1. To ensure that maps accurately reflect a world in perpetual flux, mapmakers must be vigilant about monitoring data and the integration of new information. So parallel structure basically implies that a sentence should convey or should have the same grammatical structure for different items on a list, right? So here I'm saying that mapmakers must be vigilant about first monitoring data. So they have to be vigilant about monitoring data, and they should be vigilant about the integration of new information. Now here I'm using the ing form of the word monitor, but here I'm using the noun form of integration when I should be using the ing form of the verb integrating, not integration, because it has to be parallel to monitoring. So I need to choose an option that has integrating. So I will not have A and I will not have B, right? Now, between C and D, C is the better answer because I'm saying that mapmakers should be vigilant about monitoring data and integrating new information. If I said D, then the sentence would lose its meaning. It would distort the meaning because that would make it sound that mapmakers have to be vigilant of integrating new data. And that doesn't make sense because you're vigilant of something when that something could be scary or could hurt you, right? And so this of here distorts the meaning of the sentence. So we don't need of because this preposition about works for both monitoring data and integrating new information. I have to be vigilant about it. I have to make sure it happens. And so the right answer is option C. Okay, question 2. The designation of a territory as a national park, national monument, or other types of protected area can limit activities such as oil drilling that may damage the territory. So here I'm talking about designating a territory as a national park, which is a singular noun. National monument, again, a singular noun, or other types of protected area. This types now is plural, right? And if I'm saying this in a continuous list, if I'm saying national park, national monument, or something, then that something should also be singular because national park and national monument are singular. So I don't want an option that says types. So option A is out. So other type of protected area, option B, this sounds fine. the designation as a national park, national monument, or other type of protected area. So I'll keep this. Other type of protected areas, that's again using a plural with areas because I'm supposed to use a singular for this thing, this third item of the list. So other type of protected areas would not make sense because this is plural. So I would cancel this out. And other protected area types, that again, one, it doesn't follow the singular. And again, it also doesn't really convey the meaning very clearly. I'm saying that these are all different types of protected area. National park is one, national monument is the second, or other type of protected area. So by the rule of parallel structure and by the rule of conveying the meaning clearly, option B is the best answer. Okay, let's go to the next one. The use of human language covers a wide spectrum from practical communication between people engaged in the same task to establishing hierarchy within a social group. So I'm saying the use of language covers a wide spectrum from something to something. And this from something has practical communication, which is a noun, right? And here I'm using a gerund, which is when I use the ing form of a verb to indicate a noun. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a noun that conveys the sense with parallel, as in it should be parallel to communication. Practical communication to establishment, right? Because establishment is the noun. So I should have establishment here because that would be parallel to the noun communication, right? So if I see where establishment is, it's in option D. So let's read the sentence with option D. The use of language covers a wide spectrum from practical communication between people engaged in the same task to the establishment of hierarchy within a social group. So I see that practical communication and the establishment of hierarchy, that makes sense. So D should be my right answer. Now, as I said, establishing and establishing of, none of these make sense because they do not have a noun. They have a gerund, which is a verb converted into a noun. And what about B? If I read with B, then it says it covers a wide spectrum from practical communication between people engaged in the same task to establish hierarchy. So this is a verb, just a plain verb, and it does not convey the meaning because it is not parallel to the noun communication. So B is also incorrect. The right answer is option D. Okay, question 4. Sustainable weight loss is a result not of following an extreme diet, but adopting a healthy lifestyle that integrates a balanced diet and regular exercise. So the first thing I notice here is that I'm saying sustainable weight loss is a result not of something, but of something else, right? I see that I need to say but of, not just but, because I'm saying it's a result not of something, but of something else. So any option that does not have a but of goes against parallel structure, right? So I immediately can eliminate options A and B, right? Now between C and D, I notice that I'm saying not of following an extreme diet. So this is a verb in the ing form, but of adopting a healthy lifestyle. So this is fine. This is conveying the correct meaning. It follows parallel structure. What about D? In D, I'm saying sustainable weight loss is a result not of following an extreme diet, but of the adopting of. So first, this is not concise, and I don't like options that are not concise. And second, it is trying to convert this verb into a noun by using the ing form, where that is, it is trying to use it as a gerund. And I don't want to use a gerund here because I simply have to repeat a verb in this position because I have a verb with following. So both from the point of grammar and from the point of concision, it's not a good answer. So the right answer is option C. Okay, sometimes parallel structure can also be about how you write a sentence to convey the flow of information. For example, reporters from across the country flocked to the grand opening of Southdale. The design dazzled reporters, the convenience delighted shoppers, businesses found the profits thrilling. So the context here is of some sort of a department store or some mall that has opened, because I know that there are shoppers who are delighted by the convenience, there are reporters who like the design, and there are businesses who have made profits. Now the question is, which choice most closely maintains the sentence pattern the writer has established in the previous two sentences? So what is the sentence pattern in the previous two sentences? The design dazzled reporters. This is active voice. Noun, verb, object of the verb. The convenience delighted shoppers. Again, active voice. Noun, verb, object of the verb. So then I should, by following the same logic, I should say the profits thrilled businesses, right? Noun, verb, object of the verb, and active voice. The profits thrilled businesses. This is parallel to the pattern that I have already established. The design dazzled reporters, the convenience delighted shoppers, the profits thrilled businesses. So that is an option C. Businesses found the profits thrilling. That doesn't maintain the same pattern, right? Businesses were thrilled by the profits. This is passive voice. So again, it breaks the pattern. The profits were thrilling is wrong because it doesn't have businesses, which is the object of the verb. So A, B, and D are incorrect. The right answer is option C. A modifier is a descriptor. It's what a phrase or a group of words do when they act as an adjective. For example, look at this sentence. Locked in a vault for 50 years, the owner of the coins decided to sell them. This part, which describes the coins, is a modifier. And the rule about the modifier is that it should come next to the noun that it describes, to the noun that it modifies. So here, if I don't change the sentence the way it's written, it would make it seem that the owner was locked in a vault for 50 years, which would be incorrect. So there are a number of ways that you can correct it. You can say the owner of the coins, comma, which were locked in a vault for 50 years, comma, decided to sell them. So when I do that, I'll write it here. When I say the owner of the coins, comma, which were locked in a vault for 50 years, comma, decided to sell them. Now I have corrected the modifier error by bringing the description, which is the fact that the quantity or the object which was locked in a vault is coins. I've brought it next to the modifier. Number 2, sailing up the river, the Statue of Liberty was seen. Again, this makes it sound as if the Statue of Liberty was sailing up the river. So we need to correct it. Sailing up the river, we saw the Statue of Liberty. Because who is sailing up the river? We are, or the group, or the tourists. It has to be somebody who was sailing up the river while they saw the Statue of Liberty. So the part after the comma has to refer to the subject that was sailing up the river. Number 3, walking back from the village, my wallet was lost. Now, you might say that it's pretty clear that the meaning of the sentence is that I was walking back from my village or from the village and I lost my wallet. But grammatically, this sentence is wrong because it makes it sound as though the wallet was walking back from the village. So you would have to rewrite this and say, walking back from the village, I lost my wallet. Because it is I who was walking back from the village. This is the reason that modifier errors can be hard to spot, because it is often possible to determine the meaning of the sentence even when the sentence has a modifier error. And so these errors can be particularly challenging to correct. Number 4, at the age of 20, my father let me drive his car. So what the sentence is trying to say is that when I reached 20, my father let me drive his car. But this makes it sound as though the father was 20 when it happened. So you can just correct it by changing this modifier into a clause, a dependent clause, where you can say, when I reached 20, that is when I became 20 years old, my father let me drive his car. When I say when I reached 20, then because the subject is present in the part before the comma, this is a clause, a dependent clause, and so the meaning is clear. Number 5, unskilled in complex math, Bill's score on the entrance exam was poor. Again, it may not be apparent immediately that there is an error here because the sentence is trying to convey that Bill is not great at complex math and so he got a poor score. But grammatically, this sentence is wrong because it is Bill who is unskilled in complex math, while the subject here is Bill's score. And that doesn't make sense because somebody's score cannot be unskilled in complex math. So you will have to change this and make Bill the subject of the sentence. So let me just clear this part. Right. So I can say unskilled in complex math, Bill scored poorly on the entrance exam. So now the subject is Bill. Who is unskilled in complex math? Bill. And so Bill scored poorly on the entrance exam. So that is what you need to do when you have a modifier error question. You need to look at the modifier and you need to make sure that the subject after the comma in any of these questions refers to the modifier and nothing else. Okay, so let's do a couple of sample questions. In order to properly evaluate a patient's state of mind, a substantial period of time must be spent with the operating physician by the patient. So when I say in order to properly evaluate a patient's state of mind, I'm basically saying what an operating physician should do. He or she should spend a substantial amount of time with the patient. So my subject for this part, this modifier is the operating physician, because it is the physician who will evaluate a patient's state of mind. So I can't start with a substantial period, so A is out. In B, the operating physician and the patient. There is a dual subject, so that can't be correct because I just need the operating physician to be the subject because that is the person who will evaluate the patient's state of mind, so B can't be correct. In C, the subject is the patient, so that can't be correct. Now in D, I have the operating physician as the subject. So I need to read both of these. The operating physician must spend a substantial amount of time with the patient. And E, the operating physician must ensure that they spend a substantial amount of time with the patient. So this is the right answer. It's concise and it has no modifier error. So that's correct. In this The problem is the pronoun agreement is wrong. Operating physician is singular. So not that, they. Let me just clearly mark that. And so my pronoun should also be singular, right? Which means I should say the operating physician must ensure that he or she spends a substantial amount of time with the patient, right? I can't use the plural pronoun for a singular noun. So that makes E an error. And so the right answer is B. Okay, let's look at another sample question. Responding to growing demand for high-end vehicles, the interiors of the newest models are so luxurious that they sell for nearly twice the price of last year's models. Now, when I say responding to growing demand for high-end vehicles, I obviously have to talk about companies that make vehicles, right? Companies that make these cars, because they are the ones who will respond to the growing demand for high-end vehicles. So I can't start the part after the comma with the interiors. That will be a modifier error. So any option that starts with the interiors is going to be wrong. I need to start with automakers, because it is the automakers who are responding to growing demand. Now between C and E, let's read. Responding to growing demand for high-end vehicles, option C, automakers have installed interiors in the newest models that are so luxurious that they sell. And now I see an ambiguity with they. This is pronoun ambiguity. Why? Because this could make it sound that the interiors sell for nearly twice the price, or the models sell for nearly twice the price of last year's models. There are two nouns for which the pronoun could be used, and so there is an ambiguity with regard to the use of the pronoun. Am I referring to the interiors or am I referring to the models? I need to refer to the models, right? Because I'm talking about how these models sell for nearly twice the price. So C can't be correct. Let's look at E. Responding to growing demand for high-end vehicles, automakers have installed such luxurious interiors in the newest models that these cars sell, right? So here I have categorically written the noun again, that these cars sell. I'm not relying on a pronoun, so there is no ambiguity. These cars sell for nearly twice the price of last year's models. And so the right answer is E. Congratulations, you completed this really long video on grammar for the digital SAT. Now, the next step is to take a full length test and see where you stand. Make sure to go through your mistakes carefully and revise any concepts. You got this, all the best.